Right, hello there. Hopefully this is all working now. Had to swap the codecs around. So apparently the stream is now going out via the Intel chipset, and it's being recorded locally via the graphics card rather than the other way around. Or is it the other way around? I don't know. Anyway, so what we're going to take a look at, continuing looking at our magic book. So let's just copy that link. So the magic book is just an exercise to help. Where is it? Magic book. Help you get to grips with Blender. Drop that into actual live chat in YouTube, otherwise it won't do anything. It's to get you used to Blender by just making a simple mesh, which we did. Well, the videos go through all that, but we also made another book in the last stream. But today, what we're going to go over is take a look at materials. Because I'm just double checking everything is running. Everything looks okay. Right, so because the way that we made the book, to make the whole process simple to do or as easy as possible, what we essentially did was made one book. So we made one book and then duplicated it a number of times so that we ended up with a stack of books. Now the problem with doing that is that we've used the same texture map for all the instances of the book because we've literally just copied it. So what would we need to do if we wanted each of the books to be different? If we wanted them to be different colors, for example, well, in that case, we would need to assign a material to each mesh or submesh or section of the mesh because it's all one object at the moment. So because of the way that we've made these, they are actually separate mesh sections within the overall furniture item. And that makes this easier because we can make a mesh selection. Which one is it? Select more, less, and then more. And then if we note the numpad combination there, control numpad plus, so select more, less, and that allows us to then, come on, whoops, wrong one, select adjoining elements of that section of the mesh, which we can then assign a material to, and we can do that for each of the books. So to make this easier, what we'll probably want to do first is, how many are there? It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There are 9 books. So let's make this easier. Open up our photo editing app. What we want to do is just make a set of 256 72 pixel DPI. That's okay. we just want to make just a set of images. Oh, this is actually furniture items. So furniture, furniture 8, magic book 1, magic book 2, magic book 3, four, five, six, seven, 8, and 9. Now we have to export all of those. So 512, JPEG, PNG. Let's use a PNG. Where's my open recent? Oh, there it is. Right, export. So we're just creating a set of images that we are going to use as replacements or placeholders for the wireframe that's currently in place. So as we have this many books, and if we want each of them to be UV mapped with an original or a unique image, then we have to make this many. So of course you have to watch out for having this many images associated with your, did we do 9? With your furniture items or your items, because it'll bloat the file size up. Right, so we've got 9 images. So what we want to do is assign separate materials or unique materials to each of these meshes. So we've got several meshes in the scene. Whoops. So that's Control Tab, by the way. That's a shortcut to get the context menu popping up. So that's this pie menu, which is a representation of the menu that's in the top left corner there. So that's Control Tab, and that opens the pie menu. Object mode. So we've got several meshes. That's the book that we made before. in the last episode. What we're going to do is assign unique materials to each of these. So we've got several meshes, so they will have unique materials, and then we've got several essentially sub-meshes within the book stack, and they all use the same material. So if we go into shading workspace, whoops, so that needs to be adjusted. So overlays, scale, change that to 100. And then view sidebar. And we want view, need to change, let's go 2500. Clip start 1. Close that. So we can select any of these meshes apart from this one. So this one's the exception because we created that previously. But we can select any of the other meshes, and even though they are separate objects, they use the same material. So what we want to do is make a unique material for each of these objects. So what we can do when we are making objects unique is select an object, doesn't matter which one, material properties, and then we have the material list, we have the input name. It's actually called, the name for that input field is rather long, but just input field. But next to that, this is the important one. That's the number of users that this material has, and we can see there it says 4. So that's object 1, object 2, object 3, object 4. So there are 4 objects, an object being a user, using that single material. So what we want to do is make each of these references unique, or each of these users or relationships unique. So we select our object and we click on the button that's marked 4. And what that'll do is it'll duplicate the material. So as we're in shading workspace, we can actually see the nodes that are associated with our shader, with our material. So if we click on that, it'll drop that down to 3 when we select one of the other books, but it'll make an instance, so it'll copy this material that we've got shown in the aperture. It'll copy that and append it with a unique reference, so it'll do 001. So if we click it, it creates a new instance and the name appears changed wherever that material is referenced. So we've now got a unique material. So we can actually change the name of this. So again, we need IMView compatible materials. So let's just call this 1. So that's square brackets 1. Get rid of the .001. So that now changes the name wherever that was referenced. So what we can do, let's switch to solid mode. And this should, if we switch to solid mode, now it'll be, if we scroll down to viewport display, expand the options, click on color, and we can now change that book independently of the others. So this is just the display property, but it highlights the fact that this book is now independent from these others. So if we select the original book, scroll all the way back up the top, we can see the original material reference. And just to show, whilst we're in solid mode, that they use all these materials, all these objects use that material. If we click on color and change the color of that, we can see that it's changing all the objects that use that material reference. So let's select the other book, do the same thing again. So again, we can now see, as mentioned, the number of users is 3 because we now have 1, 2, 3. So click on that. It does the same thing again. So we can change the name of this to 2. So again, that's modified the label that's assigned to the material. We can do the same thing again. Viewport display. We can change the color of that independent of the other objects. So let's do that again. Last book. Click on the 2 now. That makes it unique. And this is now books or material 3. Let's change the color of that. Let's go with that. Right, so we now have 4 materials. Magic Book 0, well that's Magic Book 2, so Magic Book 1, Magic Book 2, Magic Book 3. But in doing that, although we've created 4 unique materials now, what we've done is created 4 users for the wireframe. So they still all use the same wireframe. So what we can do here is select our objects, click the button, create a new material or image instance and load in one of the furniture 2.8. So that's material 1. So let's go with Magic Book 1. Open, and that assigns that image to the book. Select number 2. Click on the reference or the number of users. Makes it unique. Click on the file button. Browse. This is number 2. That's now unique. Number 3. Open, and that's now unique. So we've now got 4 objects, 1, 2, 3, 4, using 4 different textures. So what we want to watch out for when doing this is that when we create a new instance or a new user reference, what's actually happening is that it'll duplicate the reference to the image. It doesn't actually duplicate the image itself, it's duplicating the reference to the image, which is why we end up with several instances of the same image. But what we want to do is do that. We have to reduce the number of users for this image and create a unique reference, because if we don't do that and we just load in an image over the top of the same the same image, all that does is it replaces the image that's on this object. Let's say we're putting in the pink one. What it'll do is just replace the pink one, and it'll replace the pink, the wireframe on the other material that's being referenced as well. So we have to create the unique instance in order to make a disassociation between the materials. So that's objects. What do we do if we want to apply multiple materials to separate areas of the same object? Edit mode. We have to select our section of the mesh. So more or less more. Control numpad plus. Whoops. Let's just use the shortcut because it's quicker. Control numpad plus. That selects the entire section of the mesh. So for this, what we want to do, click the plus button. So this is different to creating unique materials for objects, because we are still within the same primary object. We just want to assign a number of materials to each section of the mesh. So we have to do this in a slightly different way. So click the plus button. Let's switch to solid mode to make it easier to see. That creates a new blank instance, which we can then click assign, which will reset the material that's assigned to that section of the mesh. So what we want to do next to populate this, click new. Because we've assigned this already, we can change the color, viewport display, and it's changing the color of the book. So that is now a unique material within the same object. Hello, Nast. So we can do that for the other areas of the mesh. So select, we're just in face select, select, Control plus, double check that we've selected everything we have. So we'll do that again. So material list, click the plus button. That adds a new instance. We can click assign. That resets. Then click new to populate. And again, we can change the color. So we've now got, of course, it responded. I always respond to people that so now we've got 1, 2, 3 materials. The default name, obviously, as we can see here, is material. We'll address this in a second once we've created and assigned our material. So let's do that again. Make a selection, Control plus, and we can use that because these books are essentially self-contained units within the stack of books. So there are no, it's all, what's the best way of saying this? I mean, it literally is as if someone has stacked physical books on top of one another. So there is nothing connecting the books together. So we can make a selection, just right click or left click if you've got that set up. And we can do our more shortcut key and it will select just that book. So let's do that again. So plus button, plus, assign, new. Let's change the color of this one as well. That's 002 plus, assign, new. Select, more, plus, assign, new. And we can change the color on that again. Let's go with an orange. So now we have, let's do a preview. I won't do that in preview. So now we have, let's expand that. So if we want to see all the materials in one go, so we've got this little dotted icon thing here. So mouse over that, get the double-headed arrow, just drag down and it'll expand the aperture so we can see our materials. So we've got Magic Book 0. So we have to be careful here because object mode, we've already got Magic Book 1, Magic Book 2, Magic Book, where is it, 3 taken. So for our materials within the stack of books, tab, we've got Magic Book 0. Let's go from the bottom up. So this one, so as we are selecting our objects or our submeshes that are associated with the material, it also automatically selects the corresponding material. So as we go up the stack of books, it'll select the appropriate material. So we've got 0, so this should be renamed to Magic Book 4, Magic Book space, square brackets, 4, close square brackets. That's Magic Book 3. No, that's 5. Magic Book 5. Magic Book 6. And you don't have to select the entire object, just select a face and it'll select the material. So that's Magic Book 7. Magic Book 8. So we can reorder these as well. So we've got 0 at the top, and is that descending? High to low. So what we can do is select a material entry, and we've got these two buttons on the side here. We can click those and it'll push the material up the stack. So we can reorder the materials. Whoops. Up or down. So let's toggle out of edit mode for now. Object mode. Let's switch to, so we can see in texture or material preview Magic Book Zero still has the original material, not material, this is the original image associated with it, whereas all the other ones have blank. Well, they're all blank, well, apart from these ones, these are coloured, but they're blank. So that basically means that the material is incomplete, and we can see that. Let's just click one of the other objects, because we have the image node that's linked to the default material nodes. This is missing. So if we select any of the materials that we created, it's missing. It's in the original. So what we need to do with these is just select them and add our materials. So add texture, image texture. So we're now adding our bitmap to the material that will then show up on the mesh. So image texture, drop that into place. I'm going to click on the open button, and this is number 4. So the image is now loaded into the image node, and what we're going to do is connect this color output to base color input. So click, drag, and if we keep an eye on what the mesh is doing, there is our image. So we just repeat that. Add texture, image texture, open. This is number 5. Connect. There's number 5. Add texture, image texture, open. Number 6. Connect. Number 7. There's number 7. And then number 8. This is actually the 9th material, because we've got material 0 is actually material 1. Texture, image texture, open. What is this? Number 8. And then link the 2. So let's just rename number 9 to number 0. Open recent number 9. Export. Call this 0. And then we can replace Magic Book 0, and that'll also probably replace the image that's on this book. So file, or if we didn't want to do that, actually what we could do is, now is it, let me check. Oh no, we've got a separate material for that already. That's alright. So number 0, and there is our yellow image. So we've now got a furniture item that has 9 separate images. So each one of these books could be painted separately. Obviously the downside to that is it now means that you have, depending on how complicated the images are, so if they're plain colours, it barely takes up any size from a file size point of view at all. But if these are complicated images, so you actually go to the effort of painting an actual, I don't know, a leather bound book So let's say we do all the highlights on the corners and we add some spine, some text, and then maybe an indentation of something on the cover. The more complicated we make the image, the larger the file size will be. Now, as these are 512 by 256 images, if we do that for 9 of them, we have to keep in mind that for a simple furniture item like this, that potentially means that the item is going to be quite large from a file size point of view. So we do have to keep that in mind when we're doing this, that we don't over egg the pudding, basically. But that is how you would then, that's how you create, let's just save this actually, save as 42. So let's open another instance of Blender up. Yoink. Open 41. Yoink. So that's how you would create individual materials for each of the objects so that they could be painted separately. And the advantage of doing it that way is that obviously it means that you can have a different image, each book could have a different look, whereas at the moment they're all the same, which, you know, if they were all law books it wouldn't really matter, but if they were a collection of books, each one having a different cover, they would need to have separate images, because so if we select all the books, let's just is it Control Shift? Yeah. So all the books are using exactly the same UV map, same image, and we can test that or highlight that by doing this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, there's only 6 books in the stack, isn't there? Right, so that's 6 books. So that's 6 UV maps overlaid on top of each other, because the mesh comprises exact duplicates of the main source book, which is this one at the bottom. So all we did was made the book, UV unwrapped it, so that created our first or our initial UV map. Let's just roughly drop that back into place. So we got all of that sorted out, the material assigned, the UV map, the image assigned to the UV map, and then we duplicated it, and that has meant that all of the books just basically use exactly the same UV map, and they just sit on top of it. So we end up with, let's just reload that, don't save. We end up with that. So there are 6 UV maps sitting on top of one another. And then again, each of the bigger books, or the independent objects, use the same map as well. So if we select one of those, switch to edit mode, select everything so we have the UV map shown. So that's the UV map for that one book. What we can do, toggle out of edit mode, select all those objects, those 3 meshes. So they are, oh, the view's reset again. View, sidebar, view, 2500. There we go. 1. So we can select each object. So these are separate objects. In Blender 2.8 we can now do multi-editing. So if we tab into edit mode with all 3 objects selected, we can then see, oops, the UV map's gone a bit wonky on some of them, but the UV map sits over the top of the original. Oh, it's that one that's gone wonky. Not quite sure why that's gone wonky. So, even though layout, even though we've assigned different materials to each of these now, they still all basically use the same UV map. So we can select our books, UV editing, and we can see that the UV maps are sitting on top of one another. And again, it's carried over that misalignment for some reason. And the view needs to be reset. 2500 and 1. So we could export this now actually. So let's try that. Minimize. Layout. So we've got, let's just double check. 0, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 2 and 3. So let's try exporting this. So file, let's just save this, save as 43. Now this is the animated version. So let's just double check. Let's just export these bits that we can see. So selecting all the meshes that we want as part of this furniture item, shift clicking the root node, then file, export, FBX. Get the file dialog and the export settings on the right, and we want selected objects, everything else is okay, geometry, all that's all right, armature, always disable add leaf bones, and disable, no, we want bake animation, so expand the options, but we want to disable NLA strips and force start end keying. And this is all explained in the tutorial. Check the file name and the location, that's okay, and then export. So hopefully, because we've used actual images, we've got everything linked up in Blender, so each of these is a distinct material, and each material has a distinct image associated with it. So this is our material, that's the preview, that's the object, and that's the material reference which IMVU is looking for, which is why we have to add the numerical append. So that. So create mode, derive new product, furniture, we just want standard furniture, go. So we're just going to replace the chair. FBX import, load FBX, find our file. What did we call it? Magic Book 43. There it is. And as it's a furniture item, it'll load the file basically straight into the importer. Normally, anything with a skeleton brings up the select skeleton root dialog box, but for furniture it just bypasses that. So apply scale, that needs to be 0.01. Disable rename room nodes, and then we need to sort out the meshes. So the main stack of books, that's the main mesh. So we can give that a mesh ID of 0 because we want that. So this will replace the chair. And we've got the corresponding. Oh, the materials have actually listed themselves in the right order. Oh, that's a first. Ah, it's never done that before. Yes, so we've got, whoops, Magic Book Mesh, that'll replace the chair, and then we've got all the materials. So those have all come in, and it's also brought in our animation. So Magic Book, give that a mesh ID of 1, Magic Book 2, 2, Magic Book 3, 3. And then just double check and then import. Get some warnings about over-adding materials, which is good, we want that. Import changes, apply changes, and there is our stack of books automatically assembled using all of our materials. So each one of these, as discussed, could be a proper book cover. And so long as the materials are properly set up in IMVU, not IMVU, in Blender, so long as everything is linked up, IMVU will automatically assemble everything once it imports. So we've now got nine images. Does it say where's the file size? Assets. So there we go, there's the file size. Because we've just got single colors, which we were talking about earlier, that's 66 bytes. That's tiny. But if that was a JPEG and it was a fully fledged book cover, that might be quite large, 200, 300, 500 kilobytes. So let's just, whilst we've got the animations in place, stance.idle room, pick same ensemble, I think it's book rotate, loops 0, don't need to do frame loop start or end, replace, apply changes, and there is our rotating animation. So all of this is covered in the Magic Book tutorial videos. So that is a bit more on unique materials, or assigning materials, multiple materials, to the same object. So the approach that you use differs slightly depending on whether you're talking about several objects. Where is it? Let's just reload that. Don't save. So if we're talking about several objects using the same material, making each of these unique differs than if we have several sub-meshes of the same object needing to use different materials. So with the objects, we have to make the number of users unique. So that's that user button with the number on it. So 4, 3, 2, and then it just goes to the shield icon because it's just one user then. Versus multiple materials within the same object, where we have to add a material using the, well, it's the add material button, add material slot. So for objects, we reduce the number of users, whereas meshes, well, within a mesh, we have to create new instances. And I think, if I remember correctly, so let's just do this. So select that top book, create a new material instance. I'm going to assign that, and it removes the image that's associated with that material assignment because it's basically cleared the material from the new book. So what we can do is just test this, select another book, select the material that we created and assign it. So we've now got two books essentially using the same material, but we don't have the same sort of, let's create a new, we'll populate that, change its color so that we can see it better. This only works in solid mode, by the way, because it's a viewport display issue. So we've got two books within the same object, so two submeshes, but we don't have two users for the material because it considers the assignment, no matter where it's assigned, to be a single use or single user of that one material. So we could have a material, doesn't matter where, doesn't matter what, but we could have this material assigned to individual faces within a mesh, and all of that is just considered the same material instance. Whereas when they are objects, that's when we get the increase of users. So that's the main difference is that when we're dealing with objects using the same material, we have to make the use of that material unique. Whereas when we're talking about it being part of a submesh or a mesh within a mesh, it doesn't work like that. We don't need to do that. We just need to make a material instance and it'll assign it to whatever it's assigned to. It can get a little complicated depending on what you're doing, but that's the basic difference. Objects are users, elements aren't. So that is a little bit more about materials. So we've used the magic book and created 9 different books. So if you're getting confused with Blender, it's worth doing it's worth doing the tutorials and working your way through the videos so that you get used to the way that Blender works, and it takes you through the process of just making one book, and then we use that book to create different types of items. So this is a furniture item. This is later on in the tutorial where we animate it, but you make an accessory, you make a simple furniture item, make a furniture item with a seat node, a furniture item with a custom seat node, so that's a custom pose, and then we make a furniture item with an animation. So this stream is just supplemental to that, because materials can be quite complicated when you start talking about multiple objects and multiple submeshes. But once you get your head around it, it's relatively straightforward. Right, so we shall call it quits there. Just drop the link in one more time. So if you're new to Blender, if you're new to creating, go there, watch that, and then ask questions if you get stuck. Hi Sarah, yes, ask away. Sorry, I just saw your comment in the YouTubes. Because OBS doesn't connect that up. No, you can ask now if you want. It's fine. Are you asking? Not seeing anything yet. Oh, Sarah's asking on YubChub, on YouTube. I have an image with 6 colors. I'm trying to mask out each color from the image so I can save the result. So if I mask out red, for example, will it give me the image without red? You mean using an opacity map? Or are you wanting to map, whoops. Are you wanting to map a specific area of a mesh to a corresponding specific area in your image? Like so. Is that what you're trying to do, or are you talking about opacity maps? Oh, that's a different. So Sarah's saying I want to select the color with the color picker tool and remove it from the image and render the result. No, you can't do it quite as simply as that in Blender. No, that's all right. No, you can't do it. You can't do it quite that way. It doesn't. In principle, it works the same way. You're selecting a color, but the way that you have to do that in Blender is you have to it's shading. It's a shader. It actually gets quite complicated because what you have to do is set up a shader. Yeah, so have you created a shader that filters out the selected color that you are wanting? So if you want to remove the red, then you should be setting up your shader so that it filters out the red from the material output that's rendered over the object. So if you right, so you've done that, but it's not rendering. Does it display correctly in the 3D viewport so you can see the image filtered in the 3D view? Because I can only think that that might be something to do with it's in black and white, so the image on your object appears as black and white, or it's rendered when you render the image. Where is it? Up here somewhere there. So when the color is, oh right, okay, so yeah, you need to set it. It requires a bit of a complicated shader setup, because if it's working the way that it should work, it should appear. So let's say with this green image, Yeah, so let's say for the sake of argument, this green image that we've got assigned to our book, it had a red pattern on it somewhere. You should have a set of nodes in your shader that link to the material output, so that if the shader is set up correctly, the object will appear relative to the shader that you've got set up, which is missing or omitting the red. So you would have no red on your green texture. If it's appearing in black and white, that means that your shader's not set up. It's not It's not set up correctly with respect to the output that you should be seeing. So whatever you see on your mesh is exactly how the material is responding, or your shader is responding. So it appearing in black and white means that it is doing what you've instructed it to do. So all your shader objects, the way that you've got all of that set up, is set up correctly to produce a black and white image on your object. So you've got to go back into your shader and fiddle around with the nodes so that what you see on your object is what you should be rendering, which is, for the sake of argument, the red that's missing from the image. So you'll have to tweak your shader properties. And it can get a bit complicated, obviously, because you're now talking about now which one will it be? Yeah, I think it's the color nodes. And all your converters. So what you might be able to do is set up a converter so that you split the channels into their separate RGB, for the sake of argument, again, if we're just using red. And then you've got to figure out a way of combining the G and the B to your output. Yeah, no worries. So you'll have to connect the G and the B, but omit the R, the red, which will then be output on your object. But that's quite a have to do a bit of thinking about that. But anyway, yes. So thanks for lurking, lurkers. Thanks for chatting in the chatters. And we shall see you on the next stream. Not quite sure when that'll be. But Halloween is coming up, so we may be making some Halloween items. Which will be fun. So, we'll catch you later. Bye for now.